everyone. As mentioned earlier, let's begin this class with autotrophic nutrition in plants. For a small recap, let's see what is exactly autotrophic nutrition. Autotrophic nutrition is where living organisms utilize raw inorganic substances from the environment and prepare their own food inside their body. Such living organisms are called autotrophs, and the best example is the plants. Now we are going to see in detail how exactly plants produce food on their own inside themselves. Clear? Now there is a specific process by which plants perform autotrophic nutrition. That process is called photosynthesis. I have been repeating every now and then what is the meaning of synthesis. So again, synthesis means putting together or producing something. So synthesis is putting together, and photo means light. So using light, how the plant is putting together all the raw materials and producing the food on its own is what we call it as photosynthesis, and the definition goes like this: process of preparing energy using carbon dioxide and water in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll. The terms presence of sunlight and chlorophyll is very important because it is not using sunlight and chlorophyll in the process. It is making use of carbon dioxide and water in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll to produce its energy. In even more easiest way, the equation explains the definition. When 6 molecules of carbon dioxide reacts with 12 molecules of water in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll, they produce a molecule of glucose or starch. Now, why I have not mentioned anything here is, in any living organism, no matter what kind of food you take inside, your cell is going to require the energy only in the form of glucose. In animals, it is in the form of glucose. In most of the plants, it is in the form of starch. Now, starch and glucose both are carbohydrates only. So, that simply tells us that carbohydrate is the source of energy for any living organism. For plants, it is mostly starch. For animals, it is glucose. So, that is this molecule is glucose. The energy here is glucose with 6 molecules of oxygen. After utilizing the carbon dioxide and the water, along with the glucose, along with the energy, 2 extra byproducts have come. That is 6 molecules of oxygen which is released into the atmosphere, and 6 molecules of water which is also released into the atmosphere. That is why the arrow mark is showing upward. Clear? So, when you see this equation itself, you must be able to understand the meaning and the definition of photosynthesis. Now, they will ask you a question here in a way where what are the byproducts of photosynthesis? When we say byproducts, any product that is produced other than the energy. Now, energy is the glucose. So, what are the other byproducts here? Oxygen and the water. Clear? So, oxygen and the water forms the byproducts of photosynthesis. Now, why it is very important for photosynthesis to happen in plants? Because in the equation itself, we are seeing when a plant is preparing food for itself, it is releasing the oxygen into the air. It is preparing the food by consuming carbon dioxide and is releasing oxygen. See clearly that except plants, other animals cannot take inside carbon dioxide. So indirectly, photosynthesis is a very important process for the whole universe because It consumes the carbon dioxide and prepares the food on its own. Not only that, it releases the purified oxygen for the other living organisms to utilize it for further processes. Clear? That must be your explanation if the question arises as why is photosynthesis important? Can we move forward? Okay. Now, before you learn or understand how the process of photosynthesis happens, there are some concepts which you must be clear about. Let's begin with them. Site of photosynthesis, that is, which part of the plant this process happens. Now you know the parts of a plant. You have root, stem, leaf, flowers and fruits. But only in the leaf part the photosynthesis happens because the leaf is broad and it has enough space to trap the excess amount of sunlight. Clear? So inside the leaf, on the lower side of the leaf, inside there is an organelle called chloroplast, which is where exactly the photosynthesis happens. So next, raw materials. What are the raw materials the plant requires, students? The carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Now we take in oxygen through nose or sometimes mouth. Now how does the plant take in? Plant has some structure called stomata, which we will discuss in deep when we are coming to the mechanism topic. Right now you understand this, that it takes in carbon dioxide from the atmosphere with the help of stomata. Now, not all the plants have same type of leaves. Whichever plant which has broad leaf will have stomata only on the lower side of its structure, because the stomata is an opening, is a very minute opening, and they are present in large numbers. Now, for a leaf which is broad, even on the upper side, if the stomata is present, it is going to continuously take in the sunlight, which is going to affect the plant by performing excess photosynthesis, where more and more water is released out. So to avoid that disadvantage of taking in more sunlight, plants which have broad leaves are given stomata only on the lower side of it, whereas the plants which have narrow long leaves will have stomata present equally on both the sides. That will complement the plants with broad leaves. Clear? Now the second raw material which is required is the water. Now we water the plants near the root region. So roots will absorb the water along with the minerals from the soil. How does it reach up? It needs something. That something is nothing more than a xylem. It is a structure which forms a pipe-like structure inside the plant, which pulls up the water from the bottom to the upper part. So water is absorbed by the roots and taken up by xylem. I said along with the water, some minerals will also get absorbed. What are those minerals? That could be nitrogen, that could be nitrates, that could be nitrites, that could be phosphorus, that could be sodium. Many minerals are there in the soil. Based on the specificity of the plant takes up the required mineral. Clear? So when they ask you what are the raw materials required, that is carbon dioxide, water and the minerals. Is that clear, students? Let's move on to conditions necessary for photosynthesis. Now you know where the photosynthesis happens. Inside the leaf in a structure called chloroplast. And you also know what raw materials are required. But let's see what are the specific conditions a plant requires if it has to make use of these two. That is the chlorophyll pigment. What is pigment? These are minute structures which provide color to the living organism. Now we all have melanin pigment in our skin that is giving us different colors. The same way the plant has certain pigments that is giving it specific colors. Now chloroplast is a structure which has chlorophyll pigment which gives only green color. If the flower is in red color, that has a separate pigment. If the flower is in yellow color, that has a separate pigment. Okay, so chloroplast is a structure which has only chlorophyll pigment to provide the green color of the plant. Now you might ask, ma'am, the plant has not only the leaf which is green in color but also the stem. Yes, whichever green part of the plant you see has chlorophyll, but the photosynthesis which is happening in the leaf alone will produce more amounts of energy compared to the photosynthesis that is happening in the other green parts of the plant. Okay, so the rate of photosynthesis, that is the speed and the amount of photosynthesis, is more in the leaf compared to the other greener parts of the plant. Now, first condition is the presence of chlorophyll pigment. When we say condition, it is a mandatory condition. Second one is the sunlight. You might say, if we keep a potted plant in the sunlight for a long time, it gets dried. Then how can you say sunlight is necessary? That is where we make mistakes. We should keep our pots in such a place where the sunlight comes only in the daytime, and as the time moves to the evening and so the sunlight also recedes. Clear? You should not place pot in a place where there is sunlight right from the time it rises to the time it sets. As the sun moves, the sunlight should fade away over the plant and not constantly falling on the plant. That is why we have mentioned the quality of the sunlight, the duration of the sunlight, and the intensity. You can even consider the term temperature for intensity. Clear? Now, why have we mentioned the quality, duration, and intensity? Now, in the months like September and October, we don't have sunlight that much. Okay, we have sunlight coming around some 7 o'clock, and then it just becomes cloudy after 11, like that. At that time, the duration or the time period of the sunlight reaching the plant also affects the photosynthesis. The intensity of the sunlight, like I told earlier, during rainy season or winter season, the heat we feel is less compared to the heat we experience in the summer season. That is the temperature or the intensity here. And the quality and the intensity all are interrelated. So this duration, quality, intensity, temperature of the sunlight affects the process of photosynthesis. So those two are the main conditions which is required for the plant if they have to perform photosynthesis. Next, events during photosynthesis. That is, what are the steps that could possibly happen in the photosynthesis? Starting with absorption of sunlight or trapping of UV rays. Sunlight, the rays of the sunlight are called as UV rays. Okay, the absorption of sunlight or trapping of UV rays. The second one, conversion of light energy into chemical energy. If you check in the equation, the light and the chlorophyll is playing a main role in converting these raw materials into a complete chemical substance called glucose. So that is what we mean here when we say conversion of light energy into chemical energy. And the third step, splitting of water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen. Now here the 12 molecules of water which is reacting is broken down into few molecules of hydrogen in the glucose and few molecules of oxygen in this part, isn't it? Now the water is completely split into hydrogen and oxygen. Now I have mentioned specifically here in the brackets as photolysis. Lysis means breakdown or death. Photo means light. In the presence of light, the water is breaking down into hydrogen and oxygen. That specific process alone is considered as photolysis. So next time you get a question asking define photolysis, you must be able to say splitting of water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen. And the final step, the reduction of carbon dioxide into carbohydrates. The reduction means the 6 molecules of carbon dioxide which is there is completely converted into a carbohydrate. Carbohydrate is the source of energy in any living organism. In plant, the raw material used here to produce carbohydrate is carbon dioxide. Now that has been reduced and becoming a carbohydrate with the help of hydrogen molecules from the water. Is that clear? Let's consolidate the whole introduction again. The process of preparing energy using the carbon dioxide and water in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll pigment is called photosynthesis. Where it happens? In the leaf part of the plant. Using what materials? Carbon dioxide, water, minerals. And what conditions the plant requires for that? It requires enough sunlight, chlorophyll pigments. Only 2 conditions, but how variably they affect the process in the terms of quality, duration and intensity. And what are the steps that we could possibly see in the photosynthesis? Absorption, conversion, splitting and reduction. Even students, even if you don't remember the full sentence, if you remember the 4 terms like absorption, conversion, splitting and reduction, using the equation you can fill up those. So remember, the 4 important steps in the photosynthesis are absorption, conversion, splitting and reduction. Now let's move on to how exactly the mechanism of photosynthesis happens. Now while talking about the raw materials required, we told absorption of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere through stomata. And I said stomata are minute openings which is seen in the lower side of the leaf. Okay, here we have drawn a small plant which is having roots, a stem and a leaf. Now here leaf, I have drawn it in 2 layers to show you the lower side of the leaf which is having small dot-like structures, which is what I mean to you as stomata. Now these stomata, the structure has been enlarged here students. This opening only is called stomatal pore or stomatal opening. Okay, it is not just a simple hole is there. It is guarded by 2 cushion-like structures which is in kidney shape. Those are called guard cells. Guard, the word guard means they protect the opening. It opens or it allows the pore to open only when required, and it closes the pore when it is not required. Clear? Around the guard cells there is another layer of cells called subsidiary cells. That is like how we have different layers of skin. The lower side of the leaf also has different layers. Okay. Now around that you have epidermal cells. That is the outer layer of the leaf. This is how the stomata can be seen in a plant when it is enlarged. Now this guard cells will have chlorophyll pigments on them to trap the sunlight. Is that clear students? A minute opening called stomatal pore is present, guarded by 2 cushion-like structures called guard cells, around which you have 2 other layers of cells. One is subsidiary and the other one is epidermal cells. Now this, how these guard cells monitor the opening and closing of stomata, we will come to see as we proceed with the class. Now, the leaf traps the UV rays through the stomata, and the water which is reaching the roots is absorbed by the roots and taken up by the xylem cells to the leaf. Here we come across another concept called ascent of sap. You might feel, what is this? As we move with the class, there are new terms coming up. But please listen, it's very easy if you understand. Now I said there we have xylem cells which brings up the water. Now you have motor in your home, and if you are in the second floor of your house, without switching on the motor or without applying the pressure, can you get the water getting pulled up to your floor? No, it doesn't happen. You have to turn on the switch. It creates some pressure. It pulls up the water. Same way, in the leaf, when the water is getting absorbed and while trapping the UV rays, when the pore is open, the water present in the leaf region is exposed to the atmosphere and it gets vaporized. So there becomes deficient of water here at that time, and there is low pressure which requires the pulling of water. That pressure which pulls up the water is called transpirational pull. When we say transpirational pull, even to understand even better, consider our situation during summer seasons. The more we sweat, we become more thirsty and we drink more water. In the same way, when the pore is getting exposed to the sunlight, there appears a pressure for the presence of water in the leaf. And now that pressure is called transpirational pull because the water which is present in the leaf and getting vaporized when exposed to sun is called by a process called transpiration. Transpiration means loss of excess water by getting exposed to the sun. When the leaf gets exposed to the sun, when the opening or the stomatal pore is trapping the sunlight. So when there is transpiration happening, it creates a pull which makes the xylem to pull the water from the roots to the upper parts of the plant. That pulling up of the water is called ascent of sap. Ascent means ascending order, moving from bottom to the top. Sap means a fluid, nutritive fluid with water and minerals. Like we discussed before, it is only through water the minerals from the soil is pulled up in the plant, isn't it? That mixture of water and minerals as a nutritive fluid only we called as sap. Because of the transpiration, there is loss of water happening in the leaf which creates a transpirational pull leading to the ascent of sap to the upper parts of the plant. Clear? Now, when the water has reached, the carbon dioxide and the sunlight has also present in the chlorophyll on the lower side of the leaf, and there appears the photosynthesis process and the glucose is produced. You might ask, now just like how the water has reached from the roots to the leaf, the food that is produced in the leaf also should reach the other parts of the plant. Is there a separate channel? Yes. Like we have xylem to perform ascent of sap. There is something called phloem to distribute the energy from the leaf to all other parts of the plant, which we will discuss under the heading transportation in plants. Let's consolidate again the whole photosynthesis process. You have the raw materials, water from the roots, minerals from the roots, carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And the conditions, there's enough chlorophyll present and the sunlight is there. Is that clear? What are the events happening there? Absorption of the sunlight, conversion of this light energy into chemical energy in the leaf. The water which is going from the roots is getting split into the hydrogen and oxygen. And then the carbon dioxide which is absorbed is completely changed into carbohydrates. Now listen students, in your book you would have been given two illustrations explaining how chlorophyll is important for photosynthesis and how sunlight is important for photosynthesis. For both, it is the same explanation which we will be discussing in the next class, probably in the revision period. But anyways, I'll give you a small gist of it. When there is no sunlight, the leaf cannot trap the UV rays. And we mentioned sunlight as the important condition to perform photosynthesis. Is that clear? Now when there is no sunlight, using what the raw materials will be broken down into carbohydrates and other things? It doesn't happen. That is where the leaf becomes yellow. When there is no photosynthesis happening, the chlorophyll pigments will completely become inactive and the leaf becomes yellow. Clear? Those experimental based questions we will discuss in the other class. I think I have made it clear. Now listen. So the so-called process which we have been discussing until now is normally for any plants that is above the ground. That is, the roots alone in the ground and the rest of the part is above the ground. What is the condition of the desert plants? There is no water in the desert. How does it utilize? And there is more sunlight. There is sunlight all the time. If there is excess sunlight going into the stomata, is the plant going to live? Still there are some plants. Example, cactus. Now cactus looks like this. Students, I think everybody would have seen cactus. Cactus looks like this. We all mistake this as spines. But in fact, these spines are the leaves that has reduced into spines to protect the stomata in them from getting exposed to the excess sunlight. That's why I have put up some points here. Traps UV rays during the day. Only stomata has to trap the UV rays. And these spines will be having their stomata on the inner side, which will trap the UV rays during the daytime. Once it has trapped enough UV rays, it will stop opening the stomatal pore. And next, takes in the carbon dioxide during night. Which part of the leaf has to take in the carbon dioxide? Again, it is stomata. Now, in the daytime, only UV rays you can get. Can you get sunlight in the night? No. So, cleverly, the desert plants traps the sunlight alone in the daytime and absorbs the carbon dioxide during the night time, and it performs photosynthesis only at night. That is the condition of desert plants. Now, how the aquatic plants will perform photosynthesis? Take an example of lotus. Most of it is submerged in the water, except for the flower and the bud. And the leaf you see just above the water, not completely above the water. Now, there, since they are devoid of stomata, when I say devoid, it means they do not have stomata in them. The aquatic plants, most of the aquatic plants do not have stomata in them. Instead, how do they trap the sunlight and the carbon dioxide? Sunlight reaches from the atmosphere only. We cannot have sun inside the water. Sun has to come from the atmosphere only. So the sunlight will automatically trapped by the cell membrane of the stem or the leaf which is present in it. But for the carbon dioxide, it uses the water. All the water has some animals inside it. Fish, just like us, uses only the oxygen and releases carbon dioxide. That form of carbon dioxide which is dissolved in the water is utilized by the aquatic plants as its raw material to perform photosynthesis. Is that clear, students? I think I have made it enough clear about the concept of photosynthesis, and these are the points you can consider to answer the questions arising based on how the desert plants perform photosynthesis and how the aquatic plants perform photosynthesis. In the next class, we will discuss about nutrition in animals. Thank you, students.